My name is Grace Taylor, and at 29 years old, I had been with Jacob for 3 years. 18 months of that, he'd been living with me in my apartment. It was cozy, filled with the things I loved, my books stacked neatly on the shelves, my favorite coffee mugs tucked in the cabinet, the small framed photos of trips I'd taken solo before we met. I liked control over my space. It made me feel safe, but lately that safety felt fragile. Little things had started gnawing at me. Jacob would angle his phone away when he texted, even if I was sitting across from him. He'd leave the room abruptly to take calls, muttering something about work, or that it could wait until later. Sometimes I'd glance at his laptop on the dining table and notice tabs open that didn't make sense, websites I didn't recognize, sometimes photos that were cropped just slightly off-center, like they were hiding something. I kept telling myself I was overthinking. That's what you do when you love someone, right? You give them the benefit of the doubt. You excuse the small inconsistencies. You convince yourself the gut feeling is paranoia. "Hey, Jacob," I said casually one evening, my voice light, careful. "Can you check if the Thai place is still open? My phone's dead." I reached for his phone, sitting on the couch beside me. He lunged, snatching it away with a quick, almost too practiced motion. "I'll check," he said, his tone clipped. Something flickered in his eyes, annoyance, fear, I couldn't tell. That's when I noticed. The lock screen didn't respond to my fingerprint anymore. "Did you change your password?" My voice was casual. No accusation, no edge, just a question. Jacob froze. His hand tightened around the phone. His jaw clenched. I had seen him irritated before, but never like this. "Why do you need my password, Grace?" His voice was sharp now, brittle. I just wanted to check the Thai place," I said, feeling suddenly small. "You know, convenience. We always share for directions, music." "You're suffocating me," he snapped, rising from the couch. "Do you have any idea how controlling you are?" The words hit me like a physical blow. Suffocating, controlling. I had never once gone through his phone in 3 years. Not once. We had always trusted each other, or so I thought. I tried to steady my voice. "I'm asking a simple question. That's it." "Simple?" He laughed, a bark of disbelief. "Every question is a trap with you. You monitor everything. I can't breathe in this relationship. I can't." He stormed to the bedroom, slamming the door so hard the frames on the wall rattled. I sat there, frozen, listening to my own heart pounding, the documentary I'd been half watching forgotten. Fish at the bottom of the ocean surviving crushing pressures. I thought of them. Irony, maybe. 20 minutes later, the door opened. Jacob emerged with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "I'm going to Jess's," he said, voice tight. "I need space to think." I nodded slowly, words catching in my throat. "Okay, you're right. I'll give you space." He paused at the door, maybe expecting me to beg him to stay. I didn't. I just turned back to the flickering screen. The door clicked shut, leaving me with a sudden, sharp emptiness. My apartment, my sanctuary, felt foreign. Jacob had been living here for a year and a half, sharing meals, laughing at inside jokes. The apartment becoming ours, in small ways. Yet I couldn't shake the gnawing thought. Maybe it had always been his world, and I was just visiting. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every small moment over and over, the late nights he claimed were overtime but smelled faintly of someone else's perfume. The unexplained receipts in his wallet, the subtle tension when I'd asked about his friends. The password incident was the final thread, unraveling a fabric I had believed to be strong. The next morning, my gut refused to let go. I watched him on the sofa, scrolling through his phone, the corners of his mouth tight. I wanted to look away, to convince myself I was imagining things, but I couldn't. Not anymore. I had to know. I started noticing the pattern, the lies hidden in plain sight. Work calls at odd hours, his sudden interest in going to meetings I'd never heard of, Instagram stories showing him out when he said he'd be home. The red flags I had ignored were now a marching parade. And I felt it, the first sting of betrayal, the kind that makes your chest ache, your mind race. I felt small, foolish, and yet awake, painfully aware that something in my life was rotten. By midday, I decided to take a subtle step. I glanced at the shared computer he often left logged in. Maybe I was overstepping, maybe I wasn't. I had a right to know, even if it scared me. The evidence wasn't obvious at first. A message here, a login there, timestamps that didn't match his explanations. My hands shook, my chest tightened. fear, anger, and disbelief tangled into something raw, something I couldn't name. I remembered our first year together, Jacob laughing over coffee, making me pancakes, planning weekend trips, telling me I was beautiful in a way that made my chest swell. I remembered the trust, the closeness, the comfort. And now, the space between us felt like a canyon. I sat down, closed my eyes, and whispered to myself, almost in disbelief, is this really happening? And somewhere deep inside, a small, stubborn part of me said, I will find out. No matter what it takes, I'll see the truth. The apartment was quiet now, too quiet. Every sound, traffic outside, the hum of the fridge, the faint echo of my own breathing, felt amplified. I felt exposed, like a cornered animal, but determined. I couldn't let this go, not without understanding the full picture. Something was coming. I didn't know what, but I knew it would change everything. The morning after Jacob stormed out, I woke up to an apartment that felt too big, too silent, and too still. My coffee went cold in my hand as I replayed the night before, his angry eyes, the slammed door, the duffel bag, and that one word that kept echoing, suffocating. I couldn't stop thinking, not about him, not about us, but about the why. Why the sudden anger? Why the secrecy? The password wasn't just a trivial thing, it was a wall, and I had the feeling it wasn't protecting him from me. It was protecting someone else. I began watching, quietly, carefully. Small details I'd ignored before now seemed suspicious. Jacob's phone would buzz in the bedroom, and he'd hurry off to answer, whispering as if discussing secrets I wasn't meant to hear. Texts would pop up and disappear almost instantly. There were subtle cues. His collar would smell faintly of a perfume I didn't recognize. His shirt slightly crumpled in ways that suggested he wasn't just late from work. I told myself to stay calm, to observe, to collect facts before letting my mind spiral. I opened the laptop we sometimes shared, legally, morally, in a gray zone, but necessary. Jacob often left his email logged in. The cursor blinked at me like a warning. My heart thudded, but I clicked carefully through his inbox, scanning for patterns. And then I saw it, a thread I couldn't ignore. Short messages, flirty and familiar, from someone named Claire. Lines like, can't wait to see you tonight, I miss you, and last night was amazing. When can we be alone again? My stomach dropped. My hands shook. I didn't know whether to cry, scream, or turn the computer off and pretend I hadn't seen it. Instead, I sat frozen, letting the words imprint into my brain. There was no ambiguity. Jacob was involved with another woman, and the more I read, the more I realized this had been going on for months, maybe even a year. I didn't confront him immediately. Part of me wanted to. Part of me was afraid of the reaction, of the lies, of the way our life could shatter. So I did what felt both terrifying and necessary. I began documenting everything. Screenshots, timestamps, the subtle inconsistencies in his stories. Each click felt like a pulse in my veins, a mixture of adrenaline, fear, and bitter clarity. Later that evening, he returned. He didn't knock, just stepped into the apartment as if nothing had happened. My heart beat faster, a mix of anticipation and dread. Hey, he said, casual but not meeting my eyes. I grabbed some dinner. Hope you're hungry. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Thanks. The tension was unbearable. Every movement, every glance, every pause felt charged. I wanted answers, but also feared them. I poured my coffee slowly, setting down the mug with deliberate calm. Grace, Jacob said, leaning against the counter. About yesterday. I just needed space, that's all. I felt a tight knot in my chest. Space? He had called it suffocation. He had left with a duffel bag and slammed doors. Yet he tried to paint it as a minor miscommunication. I get that you wanted space, I said carefully. I don't understand why you reacted that way. The password, why the anger? He shrugged, eyes darting to the side. I don't know. Maybe I'm stressed. Maybe you're overreacting. I stared at him. The words were hollow, familiar. They always sounded reasonable until you realized they were lies. You're hiding something, I said finally, calm but firm. I don't know what, but I can feel it, and I need to know the truth, Jacob. His eyes flickered, surprise, maybe guilt. He opened his mouth, then closed it. A long pause stretched between us, a silent battle of wills. "I said I needed space," he muttered finally. "Isn't that enough?" "No," I said quietly. "Not anymore." That night, I stayed awake long after he fell asleep. My mind ran over every detail I had noticed over the past weeks, months even. The calls he took in another room, the receipts, the faint perfume. Every small lie suddenly added up to something undeniable. Betrayal had been hiding in plain sight, and I had been blind. I resolved then, I wouldn't confront him rashly. I would gather proof, concrete and irrefutable. Not for revenge, but for clarity, for the peace of knowing exactly where we stood. I began organizing screenshots, saving messages, noting patterns. Each piece was a small victory against confusion, a shield against his gaslighting. And with every message I read, the apartment felt smaller, the walls pressing in with the weight of truth. My hands shook, not just from fear, but from the anger rising steadily. The love I had felt for him, the trust, the hope, the shared life, was tainted now, fractured by deceit I could no longer ignore. The next morning, I confronted my first undeniable fact. Jacob was cheating. And while I hadn't yet confronted him directly, the decision had already formed in my mind. There would be a reckoning, but it would be calculated. No yelling, no wild accusations, just truth, undeniable and clear. I realized something else too. The real danger wasn't just in the affair itself, but in the subtle manipulation that had allowed it to happen. The casual lies, the gaslighting, the anger masquerading as frustration. He had created a world where I doubted myself while hiding the truth, and I would not let him continue. That night, I locked the apartment door a little tighter, checked the windows, and went through my evidence again. The images, the messages, the timestamps, they were mine now, a silent arsenal. And somewhere deep in me, a quiet voice whispered, "Soon, everything will change." The suspense hung in the air. Every step Jacob took in the apartment, every casual remark, felt loaded. He didn't know yet that the balance of power had shifted. He didn't know that I was watching, recording, calculating. And he wouldn't know until it was too late. Something was coming, and I was ready. By the third week, the apartment no longer felt like home. Every corner reminded me of Jacob's betrayal. The couch where we used to cuddle, the kitchen where we shared Sunday brunches, the small bookshelf where his novels and mine had intertwined. Now it all felt tainted. I had been meticulous. Screenshots, texts, timestamps, evidence of his late-night calls, receipts for unexplained outings, even Instagram activity synced to his alleged work nights. Each piece was a nail in the coffin of the life I thought we shared. I didn't rush. I didn't yell. I waited for the right moment, because confronting someone blindly never felt right. I needed clarity, control, and undeniable proof. Jacob seemed oblivious, or maybe he was confident I wouldn't act. He lounged on the couch one evening, phone buzzing in his hand, texting someone with a smirk that made my blood boil. I stayed silent, observing. The evidence of his double life was right there, flickering on the screen for just a fraction of a second before he tucked the phone away. It wasn't just the affair anymore. It was the audacity, the casual ease with which he had manipulated reality, how he had twisted moments to paint himself as the victim. Every lie he had told, every excuse he had made, had been a thread in the web that now trapped him. I remembered the night he stormed out, calling me suffocating. I thought of the whispered excuse. I just needed space. And now the truth was clear. The space wasn't for reflection. It was for secrecy. The first confrontation I planned wasn't verbal. It was strategic. I printed everything. Messages, receipts, emails. I labeled them, dated them, organized them like a dossier. There was no room for debate, no space for manipulation. I wanted Jacob to see, in black and white, exactly what had been happening behind my back. That evening, when he returned from work, he carried that same air of casual confidence. "Hey," he said, tossing his bag onto the couch. "How was your day?" I didn't answer immediately. I walked to the table where the papers lay. "Sit down," I said calmly. My voice was steady, but I could feel the adrenaline coursing beneath the surface. Jacob froze, sensing something different. His eyes flicked to the stack of evidence. What is this?" "Truth," I said simply. "Everything you've hidden, every lie, every excuse, every late night. I've documented it all." He laughed nervously. Grace, you're overreacting. No, I interrupted, placing the printed emails in front of him. You're underreacting. This isn't paranoia. This is fact. His eyes widened as he scanned the pages. I could see the shift, the confident, smug facade beginning to crack. It's not what you think. Oh, it's exactly what I think, I said, leaning closer. I know about Claire. I know about the dates, the texts, the nights you lied about working late. I have screenshots, timestamps, even Instagram posts that prove where you were when you said you were somewhere else. It's all here. For a moment, silence. The kind of silence that roars in your ears. He swallowed hard, eyes darting to the door, perhaps calculating escape. But there was nowhere to hide. You're going to throw me out? He asked finally, voice low, almost pleading. I'm not throwing you out, I said, voice controlled. You've already been hiding, lying, betraying me for months. You left this apartment emotionally weeks ago. I'm just giving you the chance to leave physically, with your dignity intact. His face twisted with disbelief. You can't just... Yes, I can, I interrupted again. This is my home. I provided this space. I trusted you. And you broke that trust. You wanted space? You got all the space you could ever need. From me, from this apartment, from the life we shared. He tried to argue, tried to twist it, but the evidence was too strong. No excuses could undo months of proof. His voice cracked when he whispered, I didn't think you'd actually find out. You underestimated me, I said softly, almost mournfully. That's your biggest mistake. I gave him a timeline to leave, a deadline to pack his things. My heart raced, but I felt a strange calm underneath the anger, a quiet satisfaction that I was reclaiming control. No yelling, no theatrics, just truth and boundaries. In the days that followed, the escalation wasn't just with Jacob, it was with his network. Friends who had turned a blind eye, colleagues who had excused his lies, even his casual social media brags. I didn't need to publicize anything. I let the facts speak for themselves. Screenshots, emails, receipts, they existed. The proof was immovable. Jacob tried every tactic, pleading, anger, guilt-tripping. 3 years, Grace, you're throwing away 3 years, he said at one point, voice shaking. I shook my head. You threw away 3 years the day you started lying. I'm just holding you accountable now. The final straw came when I discovered that Claire had started messaging him at odd hours, the content escalating in intensity. My heart ached, not for him, not for their connection, but for the betrayal itself. How could someone I trusted so completely create such a double life? That night, I sat alone with the last of my notes, reflecting. The betrayal had been slow, subtle, but so had my awakening. Every emotion, anger, sorrow, disbelief, was now tempered by resolve. I knew the confrontation was only the beginning. There would be fallout, yes, but it would be on my terms, calculated, undeniable. I realized something crucial. The power in betrayal isn't just in catching someone, it's in reclaiming yourself. I wasn't just taking back my apartment, I was taking back my clarity, my trust in myself, my voice. And in that moment, I understood the first, harsh truth of infidelity. It's never just about the cheating. It's about the lies, the manipulation, the gaslighting, the subtle erosion of who you are. And I wasn't going to let it happen any longer. Jacob still lingered in the apartment, in our life, but the shift had occurred. He was now on the defensive, while I, once betrayed, was strategically poised for the next step. I leaned back, letting the adrenaline fade into a cool determination. Tomorrow would bring more, maybe resistance, maybe confrontation, but I was ready. I had the evidence, I had the plan, and most importantly, I had the clarity that the life I wanted didn't include lies. I thought of the quiet moments we used to share, the love that once felt unshakable, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a small, sharp smile. The betrayal had hurt, but it had also awakened me. Something was coming. And this time, it wasn't just about uncovering the truth, it was about drawing the line. The morning sunlight streamed through the apartment windows, painting long streaks across the living room. The apartment felt colder, sharper, like the air itself carried the weight of betrayal. Jacob hadn't moved a muscle since our confrontation. He lingered on the couch, half-packed duffel at his feet, eyes darting to the stack of evidence I had laid out on the table. I didn't rush him. I let the silence stretch. I wanted him to feel the gravity, the full weight of what he had done. You have until tonight, I said finally, voice steady, almost detached. Pack your things. Take everything you brought in. Leave quietly. I don't want drama. I don't want excuses. Just go." Jacob's eyes widened. "Grace, you can't do this. This is my home too." I shook my head. "No, it's not. You've been hiding a life from me for months. You wanted space, Jacob. I'm giving it to you." His face flushed with anger, and for a moment he tried the old tactic, gaslighting. "You're being ridiculous. I work long hours. I barely have time for anything. You're reading too much into—" "Don't!" I cut him off sharply. "This isn't about perception. It's about facts. I have screenshots, messages, receipts, timestamps. Every excuse, every lie, every late-night call is documented. The truth doesn't bend to your stories anymore." He went quiet, his shoulders sagging. The confident mask had fallen. The arrogance, the casual charm, the manipulation, it was gone. And in its place, a man caught off guard, exposed. The hours that followed were tense. He packed in fits and starts, trying to stall, pleading at one moment, then snapping at another. 3 years. 3 years of us," he shouted. "You can't just erase that." I let him. I didn't defend myself. I didn't justify my actions. I let him dig his own pit with words that now rang hollow. 3 years? I said finally, voice low and cold. "You threw them away the moment you started lying. I'm just showing you the consequences. You wanted space, Jacob. You got it. All of it." By evening, the duffel bag was zipped, the apartment cleared of his belongings, the finality tangible. The door clicked shut behind him for the last time, and I sank onto the couch, exhausted but resolute. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't suffocating. It was freeing. I went through my evidence one last time, ensuring everything was organized and secure, not for revenge, but for accountability. He had crossed lines, hidden truths, and tried to manipulate the narrative. I wouldn't allow that. The documentation was a shield, a record, a declaration. I saw the truth. I won't forget it. And I won't be blindsided again. Then came the ripple effects. Messages from friends, texts from family, even his colleagues. Everyone had sensed the tension. Some had guessed, some hadn't. But I didn't have to explain. The truth had already spoken for itself. His audacity didn't stop. A day later, I found a message from Claire on social media. Short, sweet, calculated. "I just want to talk. I didn't know." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Actions had consequences, and they were already unfolding. Jacob's affair wasn't just a secret anymore. It was out, documented, undeniable. Then the small, unexpected twist. Mutual friends began sharing stories of similar behavior, long patterns of lies and betrayal I hadn't seen before. Every story reinforced what I had known deep down. This wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. And yet, in the midst of it all, I felt something I hadn't expected. Clarity. The heartbreak and rage were still there, simmering beneath the surface, but so was the understanding that I had reclaimed something invaluable. My life, my space, my trust in myself. Jacob's betrayal had threatened to consume me, but instead it had sharpened me, forced me to confront uncomfortable truths and act decisively. Weeks passed. The apartment slowly returned to a home. Photos went back on the walls, books back on the shelves. I walked through each room, noticing the small details I had once taken for granted, the sunlight through the windows, the hum of the refrigerator, the quiet comfort of knowing no one was hiding behind closed doors. I also learned another truth. Betrayal isn't just about catching someone. It's about recognizing the cracks in reality that let it happen. It's about acting with precision, collecting facts, and reclaiming your boundaries. And above all, it's about self-preservation. Jacob tried to reach out once more, a brief text. "Can we talk? I'm sorry." I stared at it, feeling a flicker of the old love, the old hope, but I didn't reply. Silence was the answer. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. In that quiet, I realized the final lesson. Space isn't just physical. It's emotional, psychological. Jacob wanted space to hide, to manipulate, to betray. I gave him that space, but I also gave myself the space to heal, to rebuild, and to reclaim my life. And in that reclamation, I found something unexpected. Strength. Not the fleeting kind that comes from anger, but the deep, unshakable kind that comes from knowing who you are, what you deserve, and refusing to let anyone take it away. The apartment, once a place of betrayal, had become a sanctuary again. I could leave my phone on the table without fear, I could laugh without guilt, and I could breathe. truly breathe. The echoes of what had happened, Jacob's lies, Claire's interference, the months of hidden truths, would linger. But they no longer had power over me. I had seen the betrayal, I had acted, and I had emerged whole. And somewhere deep inside, I allowed a small, private smile. The space he demanded, he got it. But so did I. And in reclaiming it, I had won more than revenge. I had won myself. The weeks after Jacob left were quieter than I expected, almost eerily so. No late-night messages, no knocks at the door, no whispered apologies. The apartment felt vast, empty in the beginning, but gradually it began to breathe with me again. Every item I unpacked, every photograph I straightened, every book I placed back on its shelf was a small act of reclaiming my life. I thought a lot about the person I had been when we first met. Open, trusting, perhaps too willing to forgive small betrayals. I had given him my space, my love, my patience, and he had used it to hide a life I never signed up for. But in the process of taking back control, I realized something fundamental. Strength isn't born in comfort. It's forged in confrontation, in holding firm when the world around you seems determined to crumble. Jacob tried, as expected, to regain some control. Messages appeared at odd hours, half-hearted apologies, excuses thinly veiled. As remorse, desperate attempts to manipulate perception. I ignored them all. The only reply I ever sent was the truth, once. You wanted space. You got it. This is the space for your choices to unfold. Don't contact me again. A few mutual friends reached out, awkwardly at first. Some wanted details, some wanted loyalty, some wanted to defend him. I didn't indulge. I told them only what was necessary. The truth is documented, the rest is irrel Jacobt. My life was moving forward, and I didn't need validation from those who hadn't truly seen the betrayal firsthand. The final confrontation came indirectly. I learned that Jacob's affair, now fully exposed, had repercussions. Claire ended things after realizing his duplicity extended beyond her. Friends distanced themselves from him. Even colleagues, who had once brushed off his late-night excuses, began noticing inconsistencies, whispers of double lives and broken trust. Consequences are rarely immediate, but they have a rhythm of their own. I, meanwhile, found the unexpected gift in solitude. Mornings became mine again, the sun hitting the balcony just right, coffee in hand, planning my days without the gnawing uncertainty that had haunted me for months. Nights, too, were calm. No whispered phone calls, no arguments behind closed doors, no suffocating tension. Just silence. And the kind of peace that follows standing up for yourself. I thought often about forgiveness. Not for him, not for what he did, but for me. Holding on to the anger indefinitely would have been easy, but unhealthy. I didn't need to forget, but I needed to release the control he once held over my emotions. Writing down the events, documenting the proof, and acting decisively had been the first steps. Letting go was the final, most vital one. When the dust settled, I felt lighter, stronger. The betrayal had tested me in every possible way, emotionally, mentally, even physically, with the stress and tension. But it hadn't broken me. On the contrary, it revealed the depth of my resilience. And then came the subtle, almost poetic closure. One morning, I found a message in my inbox. Not from Jacob, not from Claire, not from friends. It was from someone I barely knew, a distant acquaintance who had heard of the chaos. The message read simply, "I'm glad you stayed true to yourself. Most people wouldn't have had the courage." It wasn't a dramatic, cinematic revenge. There was no public spectacle, no vindictive posts, or social media grandstanding. Just acknowledgement, quiet and dignified. That, I realized, was worth more than any fleeting triumph. Looking back, I understood something profound. Betrayal is painful, yes, but clarity is a gift. You cannot control another person's actions, only your response. And by responding with precision, honesty, and courage, you reclaim not just your space, but your dignity. Months later, I walked through the apartment, fully restored now to a home that felt like mine alone. No traces of Jacob remained, no lingering scent, no forgotten items, no emotional weight. I had the freedom to live, to breathe, to exist without hesitation or fear. I sometimes thought of the early days of our relationship. the easy laughter, the dreams we had whispered to each other in the dark. Nostalgia hit sometimes, but it was tempered by awareness. Love without honesty is fragile, and trust once broken cannot be restored by empty words alone. I had a choice then. Let resentment fester or move forward. I chose the latter. The power of my choice and the clarity that came with it became my new reality. And so, the apartment, once a stage for deception, had transformed. It was a place of resilience, of lessons learned, and a sanctuary for the woman I had become, independent, vigilant, and unshakably aware of her own worth. Jacob faded from my life entirely. No more texts, no more threats, no more manipulations. What remained was proof of my strength, a quiet victory that needed no audience, and a life reclaimed from the ashes of betrayal. I smiled as I poured myself a cup of coffee, watching the city wake up beyond the balcony. 3 years of love, trust, and heartbreak had led me here. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also revealed the truth I needed. I was stronger than any deception, braver than any fear, and whole without him. And for the first time in months, I felt a sense of unshakable peace. The storm had passed, the horizon was clear, and I was free.